What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Everything College Basketball Podcast, episode 176. I'm, of course, your host, Josh Burton, and joining me today is a pair of my teammates, Mr. Trevor Everett, Mr. Michael DeRosa. Fellas, it's been about a week and a half, some personal issues, don't want to really dive into them too much here, but we're back from the little layoff. We've got a lot to talk about. Today's going to be a special episode. We got a couple extraordinary fun guests I'm really excited to get into. But before we get into that, boys, how are we doing on this fine 1st of February, which is crazy already?
Living the life, Hey, we're in the new year. You know what? I think we're almost hitting the stride of the season. Like, we're getting towards the end. It's like, I don't want to get all the way to the end, but like, I'm enjoying where we're at for now. Just living life,
I feel you. Trev, how you doing on this February 1st?
Just delightful. Just delightful with, Flow Hoops has got some incredible stuff tonight. The CAA is going to be incredible tonight. So I'm just, like DeRosa said, I kind of have similar sentiments where it's like, only a handful of games left coverage-wise. It's just kind of sad, but, enjoy it while we have it.
Not sponsored on the show, so I can say this. If they will sponsor it, get your money up. There is nothing on Flow Hoops that is incredible. Nothing.
Tonight, hold on. UNCW's Charleston rematches
tonight.
Yeah,
sure the game is good, but the broadcast itself, and I ain't paying
the broadcasts
for that
are
shit.
I know. Yeah, the broadcasts are kind of awkward. I don't know who's got the more awkward broadcast, Flow Hoops or Peacock. They're both like very awkward. It takes
Peacock's
a minute
odd.
to get.
Yeah,
Peacock's very odd, and it's crazy. It felt like we were just talking about being halfway through the year. Now we're essentially 2/3 through the year. Crazy shit, but we are live as per usual on the Facebook, the Twitter, and the YouTube. Go join us live. You leave your comments in the chat. Like always, we will get to you. Before, as you can see, if you're watching us live now, we got our special first guest loaded up. But before we get to him real quick, I do want to talk to you guys about two things. Tom Izzo gets a 700 win at Michigan State the other night. The only reason I bring it up because it feels like for some reason, as many games as he's won over the years, he would already had 700 by now. And then the other thing is the Wooden late season top 20 came out. I think it's everybody on there that you think that would be on there. I mean, Armando Bacot, Janai Broom, LJ Cryer, Zach Edey, Dickinson, and all them. But the one snub I will vouch for that I want to ask you guys about, no Mark Sears. Your guys' thoughts on Izzo's 700th win and the Wooden top 20 late season award?
I'll take it first. Izzo hitting 700 felt like that was due to happen. I'm kind of with you. I would have felt like it happened before, but makes sense. He's a very good basketball coach. His teams win a lot of games. And I'm with you on Sears. Maybe it's because Alabama still hasn't cracked the top 25 yet in a long time.
They did in our poll. They did in our poll this week.
But not in the AP poll. And I feel like most of the people voting in the AP poll kind of cross over. So because they're not there in that, even though he is averaging 20 a game, I still think it'll take a little bit before he gets the recognition he deserves. But you're right. He's a hooper, man. He could be up there for SEC Player of the Year.
Trev, Sears, 20.1 points per game, 4 assists on 44.4% three-point shooting. He's one of the top 20 best players in college basketball.
I don't want to sit here and nitpick the list. I'm going to just agree with the fact that I think the list was right. And I think he's a fine omission because really it's hard to pick the 20 best players in the country. And just at first glance, I think the list is right. Leaving off, the best guard on a team that's not top 25. You can get into a lot of that stuff. I will say on the Michigan State thing, look, this is not the time to sit here and say 700 isn't this, a grand achievement, whatever. It puts him just under. It puts him in the top 35, basically, 36, because Larry Hunter with 702, and some of those guys ahead of him are still coaching, obviously, Rick Pitino, and et cetera. So, I think there are years like this we've had with Izzo. I think there's more of those years than winning seasons. In the last few years, I think that has helped that cause. They started off the year so poorly, right? I think that doesn't help his case to get to 700, right? And, I just wonder what how poorly he might age with only – he had a national championship, in 2000, runner-up in 2009, a couple of Final Fours in there, don't get me wrong, but I just wonder how he'll age in the 700 and how long it took, I think, may play into that.
That's a good point. A lot to dive into, but let's start the show off. One of our first two guests of the day, this is going to be a lot of special. We're going to talk a lot about upcoming Saturday. Arguably, it's probably the best Saturday best day of college basketball we will have all year long when you take into account all the top, not even top 25, top 10 matchups, rivalry matchups, all these big games that are going to play factors in all these different conference races. Our first guest of the day, he's a first-time guest. He is joining us as the senior staff writer and co-host of the All Vol Call-In Show. We welcome Mr. Dallas Bowlin to talk some Tennessee Volunteer basketball. Dallas, I know you and I have been talking offline for about a month or two now, trying to work this out. What better time than now as Tennessee prepares to head into Rupp Arena on Saturday for a massive rivalry game and a massive SEC showdown. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Good to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
So let's start with it. Obviously, when you look at your Vols this year, they have, to me, I think that they have exceeded the expectations, which are already kind of high. Like, I think we expect Rick Barnes' teams to always be in the conversation. But when you look at them year over year, you can expect elite defense and, at best, suspect offense. Even the diehard of Tennessee fans, when you got Dalton connecting from Northern Colorado, if you're being honest, I don't think any of you could expect to have like this second coming of almost like the white Kevin Durant in college. I mean, if you're being honest, how has Dalton Connect blown you guys away this year based upon expectations coming in, and kind of your overall thoughts on your Volunteer season to this point?
Yeah, I mean, in Tennessee's past seasons, the struggles have been they have lacked a go-to scorer. When Connect came in, you hoped that he would come in and give you a bucket whenever you needed one. Maybe he was on those signature 2 to 3 minute scoring droughts. But you never expected Connect to come in and be a guy you can count on 30 points a game. I mean, it's incredible what he's done so far. And you call him the white Kevin Durant. That's kind of the reason why he came to Tennessee was he knew that Coach Barnes had coached Kevin Durant, and Kevin Durant is one of his favorite players. So far this season, I think the Vols have, you said, overachieved, and I feel like that's probably accurate.
Yeah. Trev?
So, talking about the matchup that I think everyone in the country, even people who don't care about the SEC, are excited about it just because it's the two top teams in the league. At least I think so, from a talent standpoint, from what we know about them standpoint so far. Obviously, Tennessee's defense is something that's so revered and in a Rick Barnes system. This Kentucky team obviously plays really fast, really effective, hits the three really well. What's the one thing you think that's going to be probably an Achilles heel for Tennessee on Saturday?
If I had to point at one Achilles heel, it would probably be they're coming off a game against South Carolina where they really struggled offensively at times. Dalton Connect was really the only guy that could score the ball. I feel like the scoring droughts could come to hurt Tennessee on Saturday, especially against an explosive Kentucky offense.
Yeah, one thing I noticed late in that South Carolina game as I was watching it was it kind of like for the last almost 7 minutes, really, it felt like the offense was literally just connect the ball and get out of the way. So if he's not hitting or something's going wrong, do you think it could cause problems for them not only Saturday, but later in the season if their offense solely is let Connect be a hero, we need him to create something, and instead of just moving the ball around or stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you have two super seniors in Josiah Jordan-James and Santiago Vescovi. Josiah has been on a pretty bad struggling streak here lately. He's scored 3 points in 3 games. You would definitely like to get him up into 6, even 6 or 7 would work. And then Vescovi, he's just now starting to come into form. The main, if I had to go to it, let me think just a second. Okay. I'm trying to figure out the right wording here.
Yeah.
It's free, bro. Say anything you want. We're open platform.
Well, Joe Haydu, his development is going to be huge. Toby Awaka has to be better as well. Toby Awaka has really struggled at fouling, and staying aggressive while not fouling is going to be one of his biggest issues. So, if I had to look at the biggest Achilles heel coming up, it would be the offense.
Well, I think when we look at the offense, right, and again, I think that's kind of the year-over-year struggle. Like, Tennessee is always an elite top 5, top 10 defense. The occasional year, the number 1 defense. It's the offense, and right now you've got a top 30 offense. primarily, I think we all agree because of Dalton Connect, his ability to go get 40 a night, which is basically what he's been doing. The guy I do want to, and you talked about it a little bit with DeRosa, that I've been very disappointed in, and honestly surprised he's been so passive, is Santiago Vescovi. We've watched him for 3 or 4 years now at Tennessee be the guy who makes tough shots and plays kind of that European style of basketball. But this year, I don't know if it's because it connects the rival or if it's because just maybe lack of confidence, whatever. He's basically taken like 4 shots a game and not getting up near the production he normally does or anything. What do you think's going into Santiago's struggles? Is it primarily just confidence, or do you think he's taken too much of a backseat to accommodate Dalton Connect?
After I think it was the Alabama game and the press conference, he mentioned that when he came to Tennessee, he knew his role would be pretty hugely diminished, and that all he cares about at this point in his career is winning. So I feel like maybe he is deferring to his teammates a little bit. And against South Carolina, he did drive the ball a little bit more than he has been, and he did look to shoot just a tad bit more. I think he broke double digits, 10 points. So I'm hoping that on Saturday we can see Vescovi get back into his rhythm, shooting the ball, driving the ball, and just being that aggressive playmaker that we've come to know.
And when you look at, we've been really happy for Zakai Ziegler coming back off that ACL injury at the very tail end of last year. It took him a handful of games to kind of get in the flow, and then here lately he's been kind of back to Zakai Ziegler that we knew. Notwithstanding Tuesday night's performance against South Carolina, I do want to touch on. But when you look ahead to this Kentucky game on Saturday, Kentucky has, if healthy, we still don't know the status of DJ Wagner, didn't play last night, Justin Edwards, but Kentucky's main strength is their guard depth and talent at the guard spot. They're not like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander big, but they've got bigger guards than Zakai Ziegler. How do you think Zakai, especially defensively, because he's so good at icing ball screens and jumping out of ball screens and ripping, go back to the Georgia game a couple weeks ago during their comeback. How do you think Zakai is going to try to match up and even potentially slow down the Kentucky guards on Saturday?
As you mentioned, the Kentucky guards are pretty big. They're long. And one of Tennessee's biggest weaknesses on defense this year has been teams being able to post up Zakai on the block, and Tennessee hasn't really had an answer for it yet, it seems. I would like to see a double team maybe come a little bit quicker than it has been, or maybe you just hope that Zakai can man up and win this battle. On the perimeter, I feel like Zakai has definitely been back to the Zakai of old, that he's just going to hound you all the way from half court, maybe even full court. So if Tennessee can put some pressure on Wagner and Shepard and Dillingham, I feel like he could make an impact on the game on Saturday.
Yeah. Go ahead, Russell.
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned this guy briefly. He was one of my favorite players, at least coming into Tennessee this season. And he was someone I expected a little more out of, but I still really love watching him play when he does play, which is fairly sparsely. Over the summer, Tobe Awaka played for the U19 team, and he was the best player on the floor in my mind for most of those games. He was dominant on both ends. He was able to get rebounds. He was just physical, just playing with muscle. You mentioned the foul trouble he was in. I mean, there are multiple games here he fouled out. Like, he fouled out in 12 minutes, I believe it was, against Zach Edey, which, like, granted, that's Zach Edey, but still. But are you expecting a little more out of Awaka coming down the stretch, or like, are we just going to see like the same guy? Granted, he did have 8 boards in 15 minutes last game, but expecting anything really out of him, or just vibes?
Well, we hope so. I mean, if not, it seems as though JP Estrella is coming into his own pretty quickly, and if Waka is not able to find much more groove in his game, he could see a spot taken by Estrella, I think.
Well, Estrella played, and let's talk about it real quick. The loss Tuesday night at home to South Carolina. Now, in the last week, South Carolina has knocked off Kentucky at home, and they went on the road and beat Tennessee. These guys are for real. Like, they're top 25 good. Going back to that, what were your initial reactions? Because you did mention JP Estrella. He had to play because the game was so physical, some foul trouble and rotations. He looked good at times, but to lose at home to South Carolina in such a slugfest, and the way South Carolina likes to play and limit possessions and all that, your initial reactions to that loss Tuesday night, because I'm not going to lie, it was surprising, even though we knew South Carolina was markedly better from last year.
Yeah, I don't know if it was looking forward to this Saturday's game or what, but it seems like Tennessee were they're focused on the short shots. I mean, around the rim. Estrella had a missed dunk, and that's just stuff that it has to do with focus. I'm not sure, like I said earlier, if they was looking forward. After the game, I mean, you just kind of felt like that's one of those nights that you needed Josiah or Zakai or Tobe Awaka to give you something, and they just didn't have it.
Trev, I know you got something.
Just one last thing with Connect, because he's had an incredible year. I mean, I could sit here and tell you all these ridiculous stats. One that stuck out to me in particular that doesn't necessarily pertain to the question, but just to show how good he's been. Since 2008, players to have a higher than 20% usage percentage, higher than 56% effective field goal percentage, higher than 40% from three on over 100 attempts, 12% higher defensive rebounding percentage, 12% higher assist percentage, and steal percentage and block percentage has been Buddy Hield, Steph Curry, Cam Johnson, and Dylan Windler.
Insane.
It's a pretty awesome list, to say the least. And DeRosa mentioned earlier about, and I abbreviated some of that stat, by the way. I can send it to whoever wants it. But Michael earlier talked about like guys getting out of the way, and just like he's obviously had these explosive offensive performances. You talked about what the team could do or what the team would need if he had a struggle of a night, but like how important is he going to be, and what is something you're going to need to see from him offensively? Obviously he's been on a tear, don't get me wrong, but what is there something that you see that could be a big difference maker coming from Connect tonight or Thursday, Saturday, whatever day?
His ability, it depends on the matchup. If the Kentucky wants to put Reed Shepherd on him, I feel like Dalton will have a pretty easy time getting to the mid-range. But if they want to put someone a little bit longer on him, I think he will have to knock down a few threes to help open up the defense.
Yeah, that's brutal. If Kentucky puts Reed on him, Connect might go for 40 by halftime. Like, if we're being honest, and that's brutal. So one last question before we let you out of here, and we appreciate the hell out of your time here. Predictions Saturday night. Volunteers coming off a loss, go into Rupp Arena in a rivalry game in a big time spot in the SEC. Odds that are all trying to keep pace with Alabama. Both top 10 teams, both coming off a loss. It's a rivalry game. Your predictions, and kind of outside of Dalton Connect, one player to keep an eye on to have a big game on Saturday in Rupp Arena.
Well, Tennessee is 20-10 following a loss under Rick Barnes, and they've only lost consecutive conference games 7 times, I believe. So the team usually responds following a loss. So I would get with the one player first, and then I'll get to my prediction. The one player who I think could have a big game, actually, and it's going to probably surprise some people when I say this, Jemiah Mashack. I feel when against Alabama, he really shut down Mark Sears, and I feel like Mashack will be vital as far as shutting down Kentucky's guards. I don't know if they want to put him on Shepherd or who they put him on, but he will be vital. As far as prediction, I have to go Tennessee 80, Kentucky 78.
There we got it. And then Dallas, where can the people find you real quick before we let you go?
You can find the All Collins Show on Facebook, the allvolcollinshow.com, and I'm on Twitter at Dallas_Bowlin.
Well, we appreciate Dallas. Best of luck to your Volunteers Saturday night, and we will catch you down the road. We appreciate your time, my friend.
Appreciate you having me on. See y'all.
That is Dallas Bowlin. We go from one guest from the Tennessee side. Now we get the Kentucky's perspective. Joining us also for the first time on the Everything College Basketball Podcast, we're joined by Brandon Ramsey from Kentucky Sports Radio. Brandon, you are a Hoosier native, as am I, and you're a Kentucky fan, as am I. Last night was brutal for us, my friend. Break that down, what you saw last night, because I have a few thoughts as well.
Yeah, last night obviously was not fun for any of us involved in Big Blue Nation. It was one that felt like it should have been a win several different times, and Kentucky just could never fully put them away. Whether that be at the end of the first half, you kind of give Florida a little 5-0 run to begin the second half. They go on a 6-0 run to kind of win that middle portion of the game 11-0, and then down the stretch, whether it be a couple missed free throws, a couple turnovers in key spots, the lack of being able to get a rebound, the lack of being able to get a stop. It was just it's hard to call it an all systems failure when the game was so close, but it felt like in key situations it was an all systems failure, and Kentucky could just never do the one or two things they needed to do to secure the game.
Kentucky in their last 5 overtime games, dating back to the St. Peter's loss in the tournament, are 1-4 in overtime games in the last 5. That's not Kentucky basketball. I've got my thoughts. I can't wait to talk to you about them. I'm going to let the boys take their questions first, and then we'll do some coach chat on this, because I've got some stuff I want to bounce off of you. Trev, Michael.
Yeah, I'll go first. I feel like just for this match specifically, the first question has to be, who the hell's going to guard Dalton Connect?
Yeah, that's a scary question to have to think about. Honestly, I was, he's somebody who I think going back to when he was in the transfer portal, he was a guy that some Kentucky fans kind of hoped would be in blue and white, and he's been a lot of fun to watch this year, even though he's wearing the orange. I mean, I think he's an outstanding player. Unfortunately, he's also the type of guy that Kentucky does not match up very well with, like a bigger, strong wing. Like we know that Kentucky has struggled in that position. I think that on paper, Adu Thiero is actually kind of the perfect guy to guard him, but I'm not as high on Thiero as some other people are. I don't think he's as good of a defender as some people think he is. Now, physically and athletically, he's able to do some things that other guys can't do, but still, just in terms of actually like guarding on the perimeter, I don't know if he's going to be the guy that keeps Dalton Connect from scoring 30 on us. But at least physically, he gives you a chance. But I mean, as you can imagine, it's going to be by committee to some extent, because let's face it, Kentucky's not very good defensively. None of the options are going to be great playing against an All-American caliber guy like Connect. But I do hope that the answer is Thiero, because I think that physically and athletically, he gives you the best chance of matching up with a guy like Connect.
I love that answer. Trev?
We're going to hear all week about the guards. I know that's been a really important part of this team. But talk to me how important the bigs are going to be if Kentucky wants to win on Saturday.
That's a great question. I think that you saw it last night, or you saw some of the growth that Ugonna Onyenso has had. I mean, he played a very good game last night. I think still offensively, there's a long way to go there. I mean, he struggles catching the ball around the basket. Sometimes he's not a great finisher if he can't just dunk it. The Big Z excitement has sort of worn off here after a one-game showing from him. Aaron Bradshaw just hasn't quite been what you wanted. So I do think that is potentially an issue going forward, where Kentucky is at this point in the season essentially playing one of the 7-footers for all 40 minutes. And offensively, they just still don't give you very much. Again, I know Ugo had a good game last night, but still, he's not a guy that you throw it to. He's not a guy that you're really going to generate offense from. So I do worry about that, especially matching up against a guy in Jonas Adu, who's had a really good season, and I think is a really good player for Tennessee now. I worry about what Kentucky can get out of the 5. I continue to say I wouldn't mind, because the defense kind of is what it is and it's just not that good. Like, I wouldn't mind still seeing Kentucky go a little smaller at times. I don't think they need to do that, full sale change back to going small, but like, what's wrong with playing Trey Mitchell some minutes at the 5 now that Adu Thiero is back, and just going smaller and kind of leaning into what you're really good at? So to me, the answer is, like, I want to see Trey Mitchell get back to having a really good game. He struggled a bit last night, hasn't been his greatest lately. So, you're probably, when you ask the question, you're probably thinking about a 7-footer, but to me, the answer is Trey Mitchell. We need to get him back scoring, hitting some threes, doing some of the things he can do around the basket, because the 5 men just aren't going to probably bring you a whole lot of offense. And in some respects, if they are, then that's honestly taking away from your guard play to some extent. So you almost don't, you don't care as much if they're giving you a bunch of buckets in the post. I would rather the guards play really well and try to let Trey Mitchell do his thing.
And the crazy thing about Trey last night is he had 2 or 3 3-point shots that rimmed in and out. If those fall, we look at his game a little different as far as scoring production last night. I want to talk to you, and I promise this ain't all going to be negative. We've just got to vent a little bit here. We all love Reed Sheppard. We all love him. Like, even non-Kentucky people love watching Reed Sheppard play. He was tremendous offensively last night. He was scoring at will. He was playing him at point guard's actually been really good because he's such a good passer and decision maker. It's not the offense. his defense scares the hell out of me because, and I don't think it's necessarily positional defense. He's really good in the gaps. He's as good as anybody in the country at getting his hand on the ball, strip and rip kind of stuff. It's he falls asleep too much. He gets caught ball watching like last night. Walter Clayton hit 6 threes on him. And the one to tie it up, send it overtime, you could gave up at 2. I don't know what he was thinking trying to ball watch as opposed to stay on the guy who's been lighting you up. So he does scare me defensively. When you look at Reed and then Rob's kind of the same way. They like to take gambles and take chances, and it works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. When you look at guys like that, like individual defense, when you see it on tape, what are you seeing and what can be fixed? Because I think they're an easy fix. It's all just concentration stuff.
You're exactly right. It is concentration based, which I guess is a good thing, but it also is kind of frustrating when you're, now here it is February 1st, and I get it. He's a freshman, and something I've talked about, like it can be hard to erase 18 years of bad habits and not necessarily being held accountable defensively. And that's not to, call out any of his former coaches or anything, but, let's face it, the guy was the best player on every team he's played on for 18 years. Like it was just never that big of a deal if he gave up a couple of buckets on the defensive end. And he probably was a great defender because he's just more athletic than everybody else playing at North Laurel High School. But that doesn't necessarily always translate to the SEC. And you're right, he makes some outstanding plays. Like I think there are times where he makes some high IQ plays, but then his IQ seems so low in other areas where, like you said,
That's the confusing part.
Yeah, it really is confusing because
it's the confusing part.
He is so obsessed with watching the ball, and the play you pointed out is the perfect example of that because like Zion Poland is driving to the basket like we don't care once he's inside the 3-point line, and your guard like it doesn't at that point it doesn't matter who you're guarding. You should be hugged up to your man on the 3-point line because that's all they can do to cause a problem here is make a 3. But then especially when you consider you're guarding Walter Clayton Jr., who's a good 3-point shooter and has already sprayed in 5, like you better get out there and stand next to the guy. And like, yeah, it's kind of mind boggling for a kid who does so many good things for him to have those lapses of judgment and lapses of concentration so regularly defensively.
And he compounded it, which it's not just a Reed thing. This is a team-wide Kentucky thing, falling for shot fix. Like it's the most elementary of stuff. When you break down this defense in the wide, I think they fell back to like 75th now in KenPom. They had worked their way up to 70th after Saturday. Now they're back to like 75th. When you break it, like watch the game tape, it's simple stuff. Not communicating on ball screens, going under guys who are really good 3-point shooters so they have open threes, not sprint back in transition and talking and communicating, pointing people out. Hey, you got this, I got here. Falling for shot fix. It drives me insane when teams, not just Kentucky, but when college players fall for every shot fake. I'm like, there's only a handful of really good shot blockers in college basketball, and 90% of you aren't. Stay on your feet. But that's what I mean. Reed fell asleep, falls for a shot fake. The point I'm making here is we know Cal's stubborn. He wants to live and die by the man-to-man, and that's admirable. But I think with this team, and maybe you understand where I'm going here, it doesn't have to be a full game, but I think with this team, with the Robs and Reeds and all that like to gamble, you could probably go like a 1-3-1 or a 1-2-2 half court, even just mix it in because it allows those guys to just worry about the wings, and then you have better chances of taking a gamble as opposed to following the man through, having to play him off floppy action or whatever it may be. Do you think we will ever see this year Cal go to some mix of a zone for extended periods of times?
To answer that portion of the question, probably not, because of everything we just said. He is stubborn when it comes to that, and I think that his thought process is, in my opinion, it's almost like letting them play zone is the easy way out. Like I want to make them better at playing man to man, and he's going to kind of go down with the ship, so to speak. I don't, I would rather my coach not just coach out of stubbornness. But it is what it is. And obviously he's had a lot of very good defensive teams and some of them have developed very late in the season. But yes, I wish that we would see this team give some different looks. It's like, if you're not going to be good defensively, like let's try to steal a couple possessions with some things like you're talking about. Like, let's just junk it up a little bit and see if we can get an extra turnover or just get a team to be stagnant on a possession because they're trying to figure out what in the heck we're in defensively. Like let's try some different things because what we're doing isn't working. So what we try doesn't seem like it could really be all that much worse.
DeRosa, I'm just picturing in my mind going like a possession of 1-3-1 and putting like Adu Thiero, or if he's not in, Bradshaw with his wingspan at the point of that. So they have to, can isolate the ball on one side. If they throw a skip, it's going to get taken. And then you have these guys who jump passes in the gaps. It's just fantasy world. Do you guys have anything else for Brandon? I don't want to do all the talking here.
No, I think we covered it really well, and obviously we know we need to get a prediction from him here soon. So,
well, one question I wanted to ask before was, I remember when this guy first was ruled eligible, and I got like 12 texts from Josh about how he might be the best basketball player to ever walk the face of the earth. How this guy, like, he's basically basketball Jesus, and since he dropped 13 and 5 in his first game, he scored 4 points and has 6 boards. Are we expecting anything out of Big Z, or was my take to Josh of, I mean, he's a very good player, but I don't know how much better he makes Kentucky correct?
By the way, before you, Brandon, I just want you to say Josh was not the biggest overreaction from that. A lot of people is well deserved, but you should have seen NBA draft boards after that day, after that game. He wasn't even the biggest overreaction. There was people that were like, I had him like early second, and now he's like in my lottery, and I'm like, oh dear Lord.
I was a prisoner of the moment, finally getting to see our big Croatian behind the back first play.
I know. I give y'all no problem for that. Like I was talking about the draft people that went from mid-30s to like the 8th pick. I'm like, this is just.
I mean, I think when it comes to Big Z, like with most things, the answer probably somewhere in the middle. Is he going to be basketball Jesus the rest of the season? I don't think so. Is he going to be a non-factor? Probably not a non-factor, but I do think, especially with some pretty clear improvements from Ugonna and Yinso, like I think you're going to see him eat the majority of the minutes at the 5 going forward. Probably 25 minutes a game. You're going to get at least 10 to 15 out of Aaron Bradshaw. Like let's just face it. Sometimes that's what you get when you get these really highly touted guys. They're going to play in the games. It just is what it is. Well, start adding up the numbers. There ain't a whole lot of minutes left for Big Z now. With big men, fouls are always going to come into play. So you're going to have games where he probably has to get some more extended run. I do think offensively, there's still some things he can do that none of the other guys can do. So that gives you a wrinkle there. But it seems like that defensively, though, he can protect the rim some. I mean, he kind of seems to step slow in some rotations. The game's kind of happening a little fast around him. Sometimes the physicality, I think, is a bit much for him in some games as well, both offensively and defensively. So I'm not ready to write him off yet. I think it's still too soon. It's only played 3 college basketball games at this point. But no, my expectations are not very high. Certainly not as high as they were. If you would ask me this a week ago, I probably would have said I was probably somewhere around where Josh was. We're like, I think he's going to be an All-American now. I don't know if you have to play a certain amount of games, but I think he's an All-American. But it's probably somewhere in the middle.
And to that as well, real quick, Z, obviously, I think a lot of it's going to be dependent on how he looks in the initial 3-minute run he gets. If he looks like he's battling physicality well, getting rebounds, making passes, Cal will give him a longer leash. What we've seen, I mean, it's rough too. Not playing all year and coming back in your first couple of games, or you get a Georgia team that was a good defensive team, but you were kind of able to do what you want. South Carolina was brutal. That was brutal. Arkansas was physical. And then Florida was super physical with you. Those are not easy. It would have been much better if the NCAA wouldn't have screwed him and he could have played against some of these weaker competition to really get his feet under him. Last thing, Brandon, we did it with Dallas right before you for the all-ball call and show. That's a mouthful to say, by the way. He was great, though. He predicted, obviously, Tennessee to walk into Rep Arena and get a win. I think it was by 2 points is what he said. We're going to ask you, as the Kentucky guy, holding home court. They just lost last night at home against a good enough Florida team, but this is Tennessee coming in with their elite defense. Can Kentucky bounce back and get the win over the rival and kind of steady the ship long enough on Saturday night?
I definitely think they can. I said it earlier today on Twitter. Like I think that what we're going to be, what the Kentucky team is going to be, is a little inconsistent. Like that they have an elite offense that can win you any game against any team in the country. They have a less than elite defense that can get you beat by probably any team in like the top 150 in the country. And we've seen that, in some of these games. But I think that being at home, kind of having your backs against the wall a little bit, obviously Tennessee's coming off a loss too. But yeah, I think Kentucky can get it done. I think offensively, you're going to see them still be able to have some success against Tennessee. I'm going to go 83-75. Cavs.
I like it. And before last thing too, you do Indiana high school basketball work. I got to commend you for that. I mean, I told you a private message. I'm real good friends with Adrian Moss over at Franklin High School. They've got a super team. I went to Franklin for a little bit. So me and Adrian's about the same age. Tremendous college player in his own right, played professionally in Canada. Now he's back at his alma mater. Franklin's going to make a run in the state tournament. I'm telling you right now. Mike Davis is the real deal. So I appreciate the love for Franklin and my friend Adrian and his team. Brandon,
Absolutely.
It's been our pleasure having you on, previewing Kentucky, Tennessee, and talking about the Cats' struggles, up and downs. We're going to have you back on, hopefully maybe before the end of the year or tournament time. It'd be our honor to have you back on at some point.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Anytime, happy to do it. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, there you go. That's Brandon Ramsey from Kentucky Sports Radio, previewing Kentucky's portion of Saturday night's rivalry showdown in the SEC. Brandon, we thank you again, and we will catch you down the road. Thank you, my friend.
Yep, absolutely. Anytime, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yep. Well, there we have it. That was different. That was a lot of fun. Having both perspectives there. Obviously, I didn't think the Tennessee guy was going to say Kentucky would win. I didn't think the Kentucky guy was going to say Tennessee would win, but that was fun. That was different.
You're picking Tennessee, right, Josh? We'll get into it later, but you're picking Tennessee, right?
Yeah. I'm going to pick the refs in that one. I'm picking the refs in that one. Speaking of predictions, let's go ahead and get into it. Saturday, I mentioned it, and I don't think I'm overstating this. Saturday is probably the biggest regular season we're going to have all year. From the beginning part of the year and then all the way up to NCAA tournament time, I don't think we're going to get a bigger Saturday the rest of the year. I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong, but you look at these games we're about to talk about, a lot of great games.
I kind of want to, I don't want to play devil's advocate here, but, outside of the 5 that we have written down, there is some snoozers. There's some random games where, there's, a lot of these conferences that are good, and I have a bunch I want to get to that are just, quick ones at the end when we get to, I think you wrote down, games to keep an eye on. But there was a pod that you, me, Peyton, and Michael did a few weeks ago, and I don't remember when it was, but I had 42 games written down, and y'all here's 20 of them that I think are really good, and I just went off really quick. I think a lot of those were non-con, so that maybe helped, but I don't know. I think the top games this week are really good, or Saturday.
Well, I think that's what's carrying it, right? I think that is.
I would give it that, but then you have again, I mentioned Thursday tonight. You have a lot of really good games tonight too. High Point plays Longwood on national TV tonight. I mentioned earlier Charleston UNCW. That's going to be the second best game of mid-major basketball this whole year, and the best one was 2 Saturdays ago at UNCW. So you have a lot of those games that are getting shifted to Thursday, and it's just I don't know. I wish they had just absolutely loaded these games up on Saturday, and it seems like the top is so much better this week. These are the best matchups on a Saturday when it comes to the top teams. I agree with that, but I just was scrolling down through it, and I'm I thought some of the West Coast games might have could have done some better, but they had some good games this week. To be clear, there were some great games this week during the week.
Well, first of all, you are sleeping on Georgetown beating Marquette outright on
I did
Saturday.
I had that written down. I thought that was an interesting no Cam Jones potentially. There's I had it written down.
Okay.
It wasn't on the ones to bring up, but I figured you would. So here we are.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I was actually not going to bring up that game at all. I just didn't for that bit.
In my back, by the way, my internet cut out real quick.
Yeah.
We're good.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I cut off for a second in the interview with Dallas, so I hope that didn't affect anything. But
Put it on our shoulders, Michael. We got it. We got it.
I appreciate that.
What I was going to say is usually the last game of the day of the regular season to me is one of my favorites. It does always suck because it's shit, our season's done. But at the same time, it's always such a good slate. Always tournament impact, rivalries, all that sort of stuff usually happen that game. And we usually get the OVC championship, I believe it is. So usually that's probably my favorite day. But yeah, I actually think I really like the slate. It's really the good games are really good. And it's college basketball. There are always going to be games that come down to the wire. Just always. Well, that's just how it is.
100%.
Well, with that, we'll get into these main ones, but I mean, again, also, it's not rank versus rank, but if you're watching these teams for bubble teams as well, Florida goes on the road at Texas A&M. That's a good game. I don't care what the record says. That's a good game. So we'll get into all that, but let's start with the big time rank versus rank ones that I want to really dive into. And let's start out in the Big 12. Number 12, Iowa State on the road at number 18, Baylor. Baylor is struggling. And then Iowa State coming off the massive home win last Saturday against Kansas. They're on the road, though. Completely different team away from some Hilton magic. So what are your guys' viewpoints as Iowa State goes on the road to Waco to play Baylor?
From a column of where the wins and loss are standpoint, Baylor's struggling, but they have lost by a combined 4, 2, and 3. So whatever that math adds up to. So I would say struggling. Thank you. I would say struggling with a nice strong asterisk on it, because as we know, based on some arguments recently, the Big 12 may not be as inflated of a league as we thought. But let's be real. This conference in the middle of January and now February, like they had to play at Kansas State, at Texas, TCU. Like, I'd say struggling with an asterisk, but I know what you mean by that, so I'm not, like, harping on it. But Baylor at home is a complete – you mentioned the Hilton Magic thing for Iowa State. Like, Baylor home has only lost once since the new arena was open this year.
Brand new arena, man, bringing some wins.
3 overtime versus TCU, so they probably could have or should have won that one looking back on it. So, I think Baylor is just going – I think this is the get-right game. I think this is the typical – I don't have a ton of stats for you where I lay out this full case or whatever, right? But, you know, Ken Pom thinks it's going to be an incredibly close game, as it should be. Iowa State's defense has been really good, I will say, as of late, which has really been what has helped them, especially at home. The 3-point percentage for Baylor, I don't think that falls off any quickly here. Like, I think Baylor still shoots the 3 really well, and I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, you mentioned that Baylor's struggling. They've played 4 overtimes in the past few games. They just haven't won overtime games. Overtime games are usually toss-ups. I know you brought up the stat with Kentucky, which is part of why it probably makes you angry, because overtime you're expecting to win about 50% of the time. Baylor lost. I mean, if the refs call the pushes that both TCU players had on that last possession, they win that game. Like, 2 TCU players just went like this trying to get open, and the refs didn't see either of them. It's like, okay, whatever. Yeah, it was like full extension. Like, they didn't even hide it at all.
Purdue Northwestern last night. Some of the fouls called.
Yeah.
Some of the fouls called.
It's not about some, it's about all of them.
Yeah. Did you see UConn Providence? They called 53
50
fouls in that game.
53.
53.
Shout out to Daily Dose of Hoops, by the way. Jaden Daly, somebody up DeRosa's way. He had tweeted like 3 days later or 2 days later or whatever, and was like, I can't remember the name of the refs. Michael, you probably saw the tweet, but he was like, we're a day removed from this game, and blank ref just called another foul in this UConn game. I was like, oh, this is so bad.
It's brutal. But so do we think Baylor is going to hold home court? Because I like the stat, Trev. Basically, since they got the new arena, they don't lose. And again, Iowa State, much like everybody in college basketball, so it's not necessarily a shot at Iowa State, but they're a completely different team when they're not in the friendly confines of Hilton Coliseum. So are we going to Baylor sweep, or is anybody going to be brave enough to take Iowa State on the road?
If Baylor can take care of the ball, Iowa State has the best steal percentage in the country. So Baylor's got to take care of the ball. So yeah. I pick Baylor, and I think it's another close game, as we've alluded to already.
Yeah, I agree. I got Baylor. I think he mentions the one key, but at the same time, Iowa State, I think, will be worse defensively, not at home, worse offensively too. I think Baylor's guards are dynamic enough to create. They've got multiple guys who can create. I don't know who on Iowa State matches up with Jacoby Walter, especially since we're not getting good Omaha Bill U yet. He just hasn't turned into that guy we're expecting. And I almost tend to think Baylor's the better team. I think one stat that's jumping out to me, just looking at this on Ken Pom, is Iowa State gives up a ton of assists per made bucket. And if that means Baylor's guards have to move the ball to score, I think that plays into Baylor's hands, because they are better when they have to move the ball, when they're not trying to take when Ray J. Dennis or Jacoby Walter or Langston Love, they're not trying to ISO guys. When this team has to move the ball and they're playing as a unit, I think they're so much better. And I think they're going to take this one because of that.
What was that stat one more time to back that up? That was really good. I want to make sure I heard that right.
So Iowa State is 343rd in Ken Pom in assist rate allowed, assists per field goal made.
Whew. I looked right past that. Oh my God.
See?
Okay.
Numbers guy, Mr. Ken Pom over here. Come on now.
I mean, they're also 300. They're also 354th in 3-point attempts per. I guess that's what. Refresh my memory on what that one above it is.
Yeah, they give up a ton of 3-point attempts too.
Yeah, and Baylor shoots 41%. So,
yeah.
No. Yeah.
I like Baylor.
Yeah.
I think Baylor should make them, honestly.
Yeah, all signs pointing towards Baylor. I will say, if Iowa State takes a playbook like we've seen here lately with like a South Carolina and control the tempo, it is so hard to speed a team up. If they run the shot clock down, obviously got to make, but if they can control tempo, it will make things very interesting. Play behind their incredible defense most of the time, but I'm with all of you. We're going to clean sweep Baylor. I do think it is low scoring, though. I think it's somewhere in probably the mid-60s. Baylor wins the ball game. Let's go out to the Mountain West. We've raved about this conference all year for good, obvious reasons. Number 17, Utah State, going on the road to play number 25, San Diego State in the ECB top 25 rankings. Trev, you've probably been driving the Mountain West train harder than anybody in Team ECB this year. Maybe me, number 2, right behind you. So start us off here. Can Utah State get a massive quad 1 road victory and stake their claim towards the top of winning the Mountain West Conference?
No, I think this is part of where the leveling off continues. San Diego State obviously had a blip earlier this week. I guess we could call that a blip, right? Mountain West is cannibalizing itself at this point. They probably still get 5 teams in. Thank you. I put my conductor hat on of the Mountain West as a power conference train. I think there's I'm averaging about 4.5 tweets a week about the Mountain West being a power conference, so got to get those numbers up. One important thing to look at, obviously Utah State's defense has been really good this year. They're 41st in the country in adjusted defensive efficiency, so that really stands out as a thing that if San Diego State gets way too reliant on Jaden Ledee, I think that could really, really hurt them, and I know that that's something they've been falling back on a little bit lately. If San Diego State can move the ball, I think if they can they're going to be at home, that's going to obviously be a huge difference maker for them. I don't take that too much in consideration anymore, depending on the venue, but I think San Diego State, I believe in this team more long-term than probably most people do. And I think this is one of those games where they kind of put their foot down and prove it.
Hoop junkies, if you are like a all in on this, the matchup between Jaden Ledee and Great Osobor, it should excite. That excites me more than it probably should. That is
pretty
gonna
awesome
be
name matchup too.
Dude,
just a
exactly.
great man.
That definitely adds to it. Like, let's be real, it does.
Yeah.
We can't lie on that one. But yeah, I'm with you. I think San Diego State. I think one thing to note about San Diego State is of their losses, BYU, Grand Canyon, New Mexico, Boise State, and Colorado State, all of them were on the road. Not even on a neutral. They are undefeated on a neutral site, undefeated at home. Their only losses are on the road against elite competition. Because I think Grand Canyon is actually really good too. I think this game will be determined inside the arc. Neither team is a great shooting team. Both teams are great at defending the three. So it's really going to be inside the arc, at the free throw line, all that sort of stuff. I think that plays in the favor of San Diego State, honestly. I think they're longer, more athletic. I just think they're going to cause problems for this Utah State team. I lean San Diego State as well.
You know, those are great points as well. Neither one shoots a three well. San Diego State, 32%, and then Utah State's right around the 30% mark. So it's going to be who controls the paint. And I think the backboard and the paint are going to be the two most important areas in this game. Who controls off, especially the offensive rebounding area. Whoever wins the offensive rebounding area and whoever can obviously score in the paint, mix in, maybe if a team can get hot for their standards, hit 6 or 7 threes, probably wins this game. But when in doubt, I favor the home team. That's just how I roll. Because again, it is very hard to win on the road. I'm going with you guys. I'm going San Diego State. I just think that their physicality and inside, and at the end of the day, they probably have the best player on the floor in this ball game. So I'm going San Diego State to win this. Let's get to the big trio. And I love the fact that these are all staggered times. None of them are on top of each other unless one goes into like double overtime, which is possible. But they're all different start times. And let's start with the first one of the grouping here. The first time they meet up in the newly minted Big 12, number 4 Houston on the road at Allen Fieldhouse to play number 9 Kansas. This is the one preseason when you looked at the Big 12 conference race potential, you circled this one because this one is going to tell the story of the Big 12. I know Texas Tech, and I know what Texas Tech I think is tied with Houston right now. But if we're being honest, that's probably going to change. Whoever wins these matchups right here between Kansas and Houston are going to win the Big 12 in all likelihood. The first matchup of that is Saturday in Allen Fieldhouse. I'm excited as hell about this. DeRosa, can Kansas show Houston why they are still the kings of the Big 12?
Man, this is a weird one. I'm just going to say it. I like Houston in this game. I think they're going to impose their will. I think they're more physical. I think that really determines this game. I think they are going to have enough bodies on the glass. I think that's going to affect them. Man, I don't love this Houston team as much as they do, but I really like their matchups. I just think they're bigger. I think they're going to shut down a lot of what Kansas wants to do here. This is such a weird game for me because everything that I usually pick on is like, dude, this is Kansas all day. But like, you're going into Allen and beating Kansas? Like, there's no way. Like, I feel so dumb picking that, but I like Houston. I just think they match really well. They've got better depth. They've got, I think, athleticism. I think they're going to have their will physically. I don't think anyone's been able to push around Kansas like I think Houston can. I think Connecticut tried, and I think Connecticut is the closest thing you get to as muscly as Houston, but this is Houston. They're a different level of physical. They're a different level of athlete. And I think once it gets down to what, after those 5 guys get gassed late game, I think you're just going to get some shots from a Shed, from some of the other guys they got. I lean Houston this one. Elgin Crier was the name I couldn't think of.
Trev,
Josh,
I know you love
Does
Houston.
it sound like there's an echo in here? Do you hear an echo? Like, did that last 2 sentences not sound exactly like the thing you've heard from me for months? Hello,
I was
echo?
ready to say I was teeing you up for it, and I think all those are very great points. The only thing I have, and Trev, I'll ask you this: there's 2 things that concern me for Houston in this game. Number one, who the hell is going to step up and keep Hunter Dickinson in check for 40 minutes? That's going to be a major problem for him.
The entire front court.
Number two, and if we're being real, and we're always real here, Allen Fieldhouse, Kansas gets the home calls maybe more than anybody in college basketball.
Yeah.
If the game is close, now I'm not trying to say whatever, but we're just being real. If the game's close, the calls are going Kansas's way. So you got to keep that in factor too. In order for Houston to win this game, they're going to have to be up. In order to put it this way, in order to be up 8, they're going to have to be up 16, if that makes sense.
The counterpoint to that would be Houston's more physical. So getting those calls, they're going to get those calls because they're the more physical team attacking the offensive glass, attacking the rim with rim pressure on offense. I think that makes a huge difference, right? Obviously, if you neutralize Dickinson from a foul perspective, that'll really help. I'm just going to read you what the biggest difference maker in this game is. I'm going to read you Houston's KenPom ratings and defensive stats, and I'm not even going to we won't even say what they are. I'm just going to read the ranking in the country, by the way, not the Big 12. First, 9th, 1st, 2nd, 1st, 3rd. By the way, all of those last 5 were top 10 in those categories, and those are all 3-point percentage defense, 2-point percentage defense, opponent free throw percentage. Obviously, that kind of plays a little bit into their hand, struggling your teams defensively there. Block percentage and steal percentage. Okay, so they are just a strangulation of a team. And talking about the conductor hat I've been putting on for the Mountain West, I feel like I'm the only person left in the national media that says, how about I put the hat on that says Houston can still win the national championship? And they're still my favorite, and this game cements that, and I think they win by, I don't know, actually, I'm not going to make a score prediction. But if the game's close, they're going to out-physic them. Yeah, I think 5 is fair.
And they have them 69-64. Boy, this might look like a complete slugfest. Like, if you're looking at pretty basketball, you might want to watch like Duke, Carolina, or some of these other games for up and down style game, which we'll talk about. This is going to be a rock fight, I would imagine. I think for Kansas to win, and I've been saying this all year long, their best player, talent-wise, is Hunter Dickinson. Their most important player is Kevin McCullough. Kevin McCullough is going to be the difference if Kansas wins this game or not, because his versatility, his experience, we've talked about it. He can switch on your 1. He can play your 4 guy if he gets matched up on him. Makes threes, makes mid-range. He does it all. He's going to be an all Big 12 performer. Kevin McCullough goes for a big game. Kansas wins this game. If he is so-so, I know Johnny Furphy. Shout out Johnny Furphy, who's been playing a lot better since getting inserted in starting lineup. Give him some offense. Give him a shooter. But this ain't the game for him to come in and play soft and finesse. You have to be physical. You have to be a grown man to win this game. I can't believe I'm saying this because Kansas at home is special, but I think I'm going Houston as well. I think the physicality, and I love LJ Crier. Love his addition. I've said it all year. I think I'm going Houston, man, and I can't believe I'm saying that to Kansas at home.
Not to pile on anymore against Kansas, but just a thing that needs to be noted because you mentioned Furphy, who's now in the starting lineup or has been recently. Kansas is 347th in the country in percentage of bench minutes, and it honestly feels worse than that. Michael alluded to the depth earlier. To hammer that point, Houston is, they're not the most incredibly deep team. They lost Terrence Arsenault earlier this year, who wasn't exactly giving them prolific offensive production, but Houston is way deeper into the bench. And if you're that physical and that dominating, I saw it plenty in Charleston when they played Utah. Utah's an incredibly deep team, and they were just able to Utah was exhausted in that final 3 minutes. Love that little thumbs up on the screen that popped up. But Utah was so physically exhausted for the last 3 minutes. And I don't know, I just don't see Kansas having the ability to keep up with that. They're going to get tired in that final 10 minutes because Houston's continuously throwing stuff at them. And they don't have a guy that they can reach down. Timberlake's been a shell of his last year's self. They can't just reach down the bottom of the bench and be like, come save us, Timberlake, because Houston's going to be able to out-physical that opportunity. And that's going to be a huge difference maker.
I will say this. I just looked this up. You want to talk about desperation and wild times. Kansas is 5-3 right now in the Big 12. When's the last time going into the beginning part of February, Kansas has had 3 Big 12 losses already? If they lose this game to Houston's tied. Well, they're actually in the win column up on Iowa State and Texas Tech, who's 5-2, Houston 6-2. But if Houston wins this game on Saturday and goes 2 games up in the loss column on Kansas, it might be night game over for Kansas trying to win a Big 12 title. So this is a super important game for both teams, but Kansas has got to play with a sense of desperation in this game, which could make them very dangerous, but it could also make them overthink it a little bit. I can't believe Kansas after Saturday may have 4. They might be 5-4 in Big 12 play at the beginning part of February. Wild times. Let's go.
I can't believe are we all 3 for 3 on all these picks
Yeah.
so far? That I'm nervous. Betters be aware.
Well, I know the last game we're going to differ. I already know this. So let's go on. And I will say, okay, I've been on the bandwagon. Sue me. I don't care. Kentucky-Louisville rivalry. But with Louisville being down here lately, Duke-Carolina is the best rivalry in college basketball. They played their first edition of this year against each other, both top 10 teams. What is it, the 49th time that they'll meet as top 10 opponents in their history, which is insane. 49 times.
You might know the next closest, by the way.
Yeah, it was Carolina State.
I could not believe that. I could think of 3 times that we were top 10 ranked in that matchup in my lifetime. So I don't know when that happened. But
listen, I could do another podcast, and I've been on this bandwagon. The rivalry is between Duke Carolina is great, but Carolina State holds more hate towards each other. We'll talk about that at a later time. But listen, 49 times on Saturday, the top 10 opponents, incredible. Carolina coming off of a loss the other night. Kind of a shock loss. Maybe some seen it coming. Duke's starting to get back to playing really good basketball because of Tyrese Proctor. When he came back off the injury list, he's been phenomenal. Can Duke go into Chapel Hill and get a statement victory and make sure Carolina does not run off with this ACC title?
I'm looking at
go. Yeah, Michael, go first. I have some thoughts I want to stew on a little bit.
Okay, good. So I'm probably gonna do a lot more listening here, just because this is the game I feel like I have the worst feel on of the ones we're talking about.
It's close. It's close.
Early speaking, my first thought is, who the hell guards Filipowski? And is it Ingram? It has to be Harrison Ingram, right? And I feel like he could.
It's gonna be Baycott. It'll be Baycott.
If it's Baycott in space, that is barbecue chicken alert.
Listen, here's my thought process though. They may pull one of the old tactics of listen, we'll let Filipowski get his. We're not letting Proctor, we're not letting Roach, we're not letting McCain, we're not letting the guards go off, and we'll beat them that way. Because if Filipowski goes for 30 and 15, Duke's not going to win if nobody else does anything. So that maybe they do that. Maybe they're just like, well,
Yeah, that's a good call. I remember when this is a very greasy game I'm bringing up, but it was in Maui. I believe it was in Maui, maybe in Atlantis, where Roy Williams did that against the Juwan Howard, Jeffrey Carroll, Oklahoma State team. I mean, not Juwan Howard, Juwan Evans, the little point guard. I swear he had 43 points, and I think it was like 33 or 43 points. I swear Oklahoma State finished with 56 as a team. So it can work.
Kentucky did that in 2000. Kentucky did that in 2011 in the Sweet 16. Ohio State #1 ranked team all year long. They're the overall #1 seed. That's when they had Solinger, and nobody could figure them out. They were blowing everybody out. Cal said, "Screw it, we'll play Josh Harrelson 1v1. We'll shut the guards down." don't matter what Sullinger does. He had a great game. Kentucky knocked him out. So it's been done and it works.
Yeah.
You just have to have the right personnel.
Yeah. I think we're getting good Jeremy Roach right now, and I think Jeremy Roach versus a reclass point guard too is a matchup I like. I love Elliot Cadeau. I think Elliot Cadeau is going to be a star. I don't think he's there yet. And to be fair, he should be a senior in high school. I mean, what he is doing is really impressive, and I don't think we're talking about that enough as media folk. Man, early on, I want to hear what you guys have to say. I kind of lean Duke.
Trev, to his point on Cadeau, he's just not an offensive threat. Really good passer, good stabilized point guard, but he doesn't give you anything on the offensive end right now.
He's exactly what you think of for guys like me who have been around this rivalry their whole life. Like, it's Carolina when they're playing their best in their best offense, they have a traditional point guard, and this is exactly what you want to think of. Kendall Marshall, Phil Ford, Raymond Felton. I'm doing a ton of point guards disservices, but you know what I mean. This is the biggest thing to think about. This is the ACC's best offense. I filtered by conference only on KenPom, and the ACC's best defense. That's exactly what you think it is, which is why Michael's like, oh, it's close, or this is what I think, or this is exactly what we think, right? This game's supposed to be close. These two hate each other. I'm not giving you anything outside of the realm of possibility that's any like importance that's, oh, this is best offense versus best defense. I'm just emphasizing that point. But UNC is the best offensive rebounding team in the country, and I think if this game is, or in the conference, if this is that type of game, or that, it comes down to a few plays, like a lot of these games do between these two guys. By the way, I don't have the stat in front of me, but not only is the most, impressive thing about them the top 25, the amount of times they played top 10, whatever, but in the last 48 matchups, it's like a 1 point differential or whatever. It's no
wins
other,
and all.
No other rivalry does. Like that. It's not even like that stat's been a thing for years. I remember as a kid watching this game with my dad, who's a big Duke fan, and that stat's been brought up every 20 years. They update the stat basically every 10 years. They're just like, oh, look how close the rivalry is. Obviously, they'll cut it off to make it look better. Don't get me wrong, I know how they're doing it, but the point being is if it comes down to that close of a game, offensive rebounding percentage for Carolina, they're an incredible team, especially if Baycott is on Filipowski. We've already talked about that ad nauseum, but that puts Harrison Ingram, who had 18, 19 rebounds against NC State. We've seen what he could do this year. It puts him in a position to be the offensive glass crasher. That better? Jesus. Glass crasher. And then you mentioned Jeremy Roach. We're also getting National Player of the Year. I don't remember if he's on the list we talked about at the top. RJ Davis. I hope he is. I assume he is.
He's got to be. Yeah, I think he is.
But we're getting the best RJ Davis we've ever gotten in his career.
Yeah.
And this allows him, if Cadeau can just keep the ball in his hand and not turn the ball over, RJ Davis is going to have a clinic against these Duke guards, especially Proctor. I know they've played each other now twice, but I think Carolina wins this game. I've been to the Dean Smith Center when it's, people mention the gray hairs plenty. I think Josh has made the comparison to Kentucky many times. But when this game is just, I've never been, I can't personally attest for it, but I've been to big games for Carolina at their house, and it's one of the best. It really is. I have to give it a ton of credit. So I think Carolina wins by 1.
Trev, you talked about it. I'm glad you brought it up. Duke, number 1 offensive team in ACC. Carolina, the number 1 defensive team. But dive in a little bit further. Duke, the number 1, not only offense, but number 1 in take care of the basketball, not turning it over, turnover percentage. Carolina's defense, despite being number 1, they're second to last in creating turnover percentage. What that means, Duke takes care of the basketball. Carolina doesn't force turnovers. Carolina's got to get this game in train. Now, not necessarily. Let me back that up. Let me retract that. Because Carolina's been so great this year because they can play slow down games, but obviously the Carolina DNA is track meets. Duke's one of these programs historically, there's only a few that don't mind a track meet at times with Carolina, the Duke, Kentucky, a couple of those teams like that. So I do expect this to be more of a half-court based team or half-court based game, but with opportunities to run. RJ Davis, phenomenal. There was another stat here. Oh, 3-point shooting. Duke, 40.3% from behind the 3-point line. Carolina, 3-point defense, number 1 in the conference. Teams are only shooting 26.8% in ACC play against Carolina. A lot of yin and yang between these defensive-minded teams. This game's going to be electric like always, and it's going to be razor tight all the way through. Man, this is a hard one to call. I think I'm with you. I think RJ Davis is going to have a big game. I think all the stars, because it's a big time game will come out in this game. I think the difference maker is Cormac Ryan. I think his ability to stretch a team out. Now, I'm not expecting like 16, 17 points, but I'm expecting him to have 2 or 3, 4 threes, attack the paint, create some plays. I think a guy like Cormac Ryan in these really tight games are always the difference makers. I think Cormac Ryan, if he can get off from behind the arc, is the slight difference they need to win this game. I'm going Carolina with you. 1-2 point ball game, but great game all the way through. What a rivalry. And I do want to ask before we move on to our last game, I want to talk about, I always like in this perspective because I've talked about in past talk about my dad or my family about their mentality going into like big Kentucky games or back in the day at IU games. Your dad's a Duke fan. I'm sure you've talked to him this week. What's his thoughts? How's he feeling? Is he a little anxious on edge right now, or what's he feeling?
It's amazing that I have the passion for college basketball that I do because he does not care until 5:59 p.m. It is the most brain numbing. Yankees games are the same way. Like, it is the most brain numbing thing ever. And every time I'm over there,
yeah.
I mean, literally, and then literally they could lose by 100. And as soon as, what I say, 5:59. So as soon as 9:01 hits or whatever, I got the time off there.
Yeah.
Basically, he's like, all right, move on to the next one. Like, it's just like it makes me want to vomit because if State were to lose at Georgia Tech like Carolina did, like I'm out for like 3 days. Like, I'm just gone. So
you should have seen me last night. Like I was telling Brandon.
No, I'm gonna text
you guys
with you.
Don't get used to losses like that, dude. I've gone through so many
I know,
but, to like Radford or Southern Illinois gets you. It's like,
yeah,
dude.
I will say though, the Georgia Tech thing really quick. I don't know if y'all saw this, but their last win at Georgia Tech was when Roy Williams was coaching. It was like his first year or second year, and I think it was 2005 or early in his career there, and in like the last 20 years, and it was like a 1-point victory. So, I give Damon Stoudemire a lot of credit. I did publicly after that game. However, I have to give Georgia Tech a lot of credit because Carolina just cannot. You want a betting like thing to look forward to in the future? Just keep betting Georgia Tech at home against Carolina. It's going to happen every time.
Look at that. Real quick, sidebar, since you talked about it. Georgia Tech's got 3 ACC wins, 2 of them at home against Duke and Carolina, which we're talking about. Insanity, bro. It's insane. The last thing, so we got our predictions. Me and Trev went Carolina. DeRosa, are you hard set on Duke going into Chapel Hill and getting a big win here?
I'm going to stick with Duke. Yeah, I'm going to stick with Duke. We'll have.
Why is this the one we differ on? Like, this is just so funny that this is the one we differ on. Like,
I mean, I can see it, and you look at the ACC race. Carolina, that loss opened the door for a team like Duke. Now it opened the door for them. They're in second place behind Carolina. Carolina's 9-1 ACC play. Duke 7-2. A win on Saturday for the Dukies brings them to 8-2. Puts them 1 game behind, or well, actually a half game, 1 game in the win column behind. So it could open that ACC race up, or Carolina can get that separation back. And if they win this game, as long as they don't drop any more to like Georgia Tech down the road or whoever, I think this is Carolina's ACC to lose. Let's go to our final game we want to preview in depth here. We've already talked about it all day long with our special guest, Dallas Bowlin from the All Vol Call-In Show, and then Brandon Ramsey from Kentucky Sports Radio. But you've got the Tennessee Volunteers, number 5, heading in the Rupp Arena to play number 8 Kentucky. We did do a lot of the preview, so I want to ask you guys quick predictions, I guess, things to look out for maybe we didn't talk about. And, how are we feeling? Both teams coming off of a loss at home this week already.
I think the fact that both teams are coming off of a loss is really interesting. I think it really adds something to this game. Particularly like when you look at the Kentucky-Florida game, it's like the veteran guards of Florida really took that game over late. Like Walter Clayton had an incredible game. Like he hit a ton of shots, but it wasn't just shooting the ball. I feel like he moved the ball well. I feel like he created Zion pulling. I think that's really a completely different dynamic to this Florida team. And I think that win will get Florida into the tournament. I think that is the one. They needed a key win. They beat everybody else. They just got it. And when you look at Tennessee, even you probably, Josh, were on this well before I was, but that South Carolina team's like actually good. Like they're legit good. Yeah. There's like no other way to put it. Like we can't deny it anymore. We can't be like, their schedule was easy. They're just good.
It's brutal to play against because they control the pace with experienced talent. you can't speed them up, and then they hit big shot after big shot. It's like they're going to be, listen, full disclosure, they make the NCAA tournament. They'll be what, like an 8, 9, 10, 7, whatever. They're going to be a motherfucker to play against with that style.
Just like they
On
were
one
the year
day's
they made
notice,
the Final Four.
Yeah. Imagine they win the first round game. You have one day to prepare for that. They're going to be a motherfucker to play against.
I said this after the Clemson game earlier this year in non-con. I said it on this podcast. I got flack for this, like all over Twitter. I can go look it up. I said that was one of the top 5 most exciting games we're going to watch this year. And it was. And it just, people were like, I don't know, South Carolina, whatever. And I'm like, look at it now.
Yeah, I had that game in a couple of money line parlays because I believe Clemson was at home, and I'm like, this South Carolina team's overrated. I watched the end of that game, and I'm like, yeah, this team, I was right. Clemson is amazing. Bust off. Yeah, no, South Carolina's really good. You can't deny it anymore. But just in terms of this game, both teams coming off of a loss, like I think that really adds some. The loser of this game is going to be on a 2-game losing streak, and knowing how rabid these fan bases are, some team is going to lose their shit because they lost 2 games. Which is always a funny picture in my mind because it's like first time, really? Please. But no, I got Tennessee in this one. I think Tennessee matches up well. I think the fact that they have veteran guards against Kentucky's inexperienced guards, I think matters a lot. I think Florida proved that you can do that. Tennessee, I think, can control the pace, and I don't think they have a matchup for Dalton Connect. That was why that's the first question I asked Brandon. Who guards Dalton Connect? I don't think they got him. And inside, especially if DJ Wagner doesn't play too, we don't know his status, but DJ Wagner is really a really legit downhill threat. I think he would add another element to this offense, particularly in this matchup that I think they need. I honestly think Tennessee, I'm fairly confident Tennessee wins this one.
I like how Michael's just has the confidence to show up and just put that out there in front of Josh and in front of the ether.
Listen, you know me. I'm realistic, bro.
Yeah, he is.
You know me.
I give him credit for that. Absolutely.
2 things that I'm considering. This is a home game for Kentucky. That has to matter. Again, talking about Dean Sis Center, the gray hairs, they just move him out of the way for this game. It's like, all right.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. It'll be wild.
And then I've said this all year. This Tennessee is a team that suffocates you defensively, gets you late into the shot clock, and if they can control Reeves shooting so many of those late shot clock shots that I think he can kind of shoot them out of games a little bit in those spots. I've mentioned it plenty of times. This is a game where that could really, really hurt you, especially if this is a Tennessee team that we've always joked about the offense, right? And this is obviously, we know they can be really good. So if they can control that and keep Reeves controlled and letting him be efficient, I think Kentucky wins this. I don't feel great about it, though. I'll be honest with you. I've changed my prediction 3 times since we started recording. And I think the home environment, if they can control, like I said, get Reeves into spots where he's not forcing shots, I think their offense will be too fast even for Tennessee's defense. And sorry to the all-call Vol whatever show. 20 and I love the stat he threw out there, 20-10 following a conference loss, and then back-to-back conference losses only 7 times under Rick Barnes. When you say that out loud, that sounds impressive. It's actually not that impressive. So I am going to say that Kentucky wins this game.
Listen, I'm completely realistic. There's a couple things. I'm just not even going to say defense. We know their issues. We've talked about it. It's a real concern. The good thing about a game like this outside of Dalton Connect, it's not like Tennessee puts up a shit ton of numbers. So it's something to keep an eye on. DJ Wagner, you mentioned DeRosa. Kentucky's played 2 games without him this year, and they've lost both of them at home. UNC Wilmington, he did not play. They got beat. Florida, he did not play. They got beat. DJ Wagner is vital to this team's success because he actually plays defense, right? And it's not his fault that he plays good defense and one of his other teammates let him down. So he's so vital to this team. If he plays Saturday night, I'll feel a lot better about it.
It's a good point, though. And you mentioned this. I'm glad you said that. Even in games he struggled, games that we recap that night, the Champions Classic, right? He struggled in some of those games and like early in the year, and they still won those games because at least the impact of being on the floor, we know what he can be, even if he's a shell of himself. So obviously you don't want to play through some kind of injury. I don't know if you said what it was, but
ankles, all they said. We don't know outside ankle.
You got to be sure if you're going to put somebody out there with an ankle, even on defense, that you don't want him to be even more reliability if he's there at the same time with Shepard. So yeah, that's something you got to be careful with.
Couple other things. This is a big time must win for Kentucky in the SEC race and a lot of different things, seeding, because you win this, it's a massive quad 1 and you kind of feel like you're back on track. But the schedule, we've talked about it all year. February is going to be a real test for the Cats. Tennessee on Saturday night. You've got away at Vanderbilt next Tuesday. Gonzaga comes to town the Saturday after next. Then you got Mississippi, Auburn, LSU, Alabama, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Vandy, Tennessee. That's a brutal final end of the final month and a half of the year before SEC tournament play. So Kentucky's playing with their backs against the wall, got to get a win. We need to know the status of DJ Wagner. If he plays, I feel much better about it. I think you've just got to try to manage Dalton Knecht as best as you can. That dude is going to score regardless of what you do. He's going to find a way to get 25, 30 points. You cannot let Vescovi finally get off this season. You can't let Zakai Ziegler have like a 19, 20-point game. You can't let Jemai Mashak or whoever, the supporting cast has to be very quiet. On the other end, though, Tennessee has this elite defense, but I would pick on I would pick on Santiago Vescovi. He's not a great defender. Individual defender, and you have to match up against these fast, elite Kentucky guards. I would pick on him as much as possible. I would find ways to put Tennessee in switches and then take advantage of some of their bigs jumping out on the Kentucky guards. All that being said, man, with all of it, damn it, because I do think this is a coin flip. I'm going Kentucky. I'm not 100% confident in this pick. I actually think Tennessee, especially if DJ doesn't play, Tennessee wins the game. But I'm going Kentucky. I think they make enough plays. And you talked about Tennessee getting them out, not be able to score, go blow for blow with them. All you got to do is look back at the last time they were on the road and against a team that played up and down fast pace. They played against North Carolina, and North Carolina put 100 on their head. The last similar style team that Carolina put 100 on their head and could have easily won by 40 had Knecht not went for 40 that night. So I think Kentucky's going to score a shit ton of points, but I'm going the Cats. Not 100% confident in that at all. Let's go to a couple of other games to keep an eye on, and I will start first. Keep an eye on Gonzaga, St. Mary's. Both of them, honestly, are starting to get some wins. They're starting to put a little resume together. Neither one's still great, let's be honest. But they're starting to get better. I think they're both on winning streaks of 6 games or more. And this will be for the WCC race, even though they play twice. Whoever wins this one, I think will have the upper hand to carry them through the rest of the way. Keep an eye on that one. I don't have a winner for it because neither team really impresses me, but they are starting to play better, and I have to give them a shout out for that.
I'll be quick. I had that one written down as well. That's 10:30 p.m., so definitely want to stay up late for that one. At 6 p.m., the exact same time as Duke Carolina on ESPN2 is arguably just as good of a game. Drake at Indiana State.
That was my other one. Yeah, there we go. That's the other one.
That's going to be incredible. This is we're on fringe. One of these two teams makes the tournament at large. Indiana State has a better resume for that. If they make the conference championship game and lose to Drake again, or whoever, I guess really technically, but it would probably be Drake if it's set up right, then Indiana State can make the tournament at large. Auburn at Ole Miss, after what I saw from Ole Miss against Mississippi State. Am I stealing every one of the? I'm just writing down ones that I liked.
Yeah, keep going. Okay, I prepared with another one. So if you take that one, I'm going to be actually angry.
I know what it is.
I know what it is, and I will leave it alone.
It's
last
the Big
one,
East,
yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll let y'all go over that one in a second. The last one, you mentioned earlier, and I waited till the end to bring this up. You mentioned earlier about bubble, right? A lot of games. Yeah. There's a lot of games that are really important to the bubble. The winner of Syracuse Wake Forest is probably completely eliminated from the tournament. I hate to say that. It's at Joel Coliseum. It's a Q2 opportunity there. But my point being is Syracuse is on this kind of streak right now where it feels like they're really getting right at the right time. They beat NC State at home the other day. They've got some quality wins under their belt. Obviously, I still believe in this Wake team, but that loss at Pitt, I think they're still the better team than Pitt. And the case for them is
on the road, man.
They just need to win the games that they feel like they should. And that at Pitt game, I got a pretty bad taste in my mouth coming out of that game. So Wake needs this game at home on Saturday against Syracuse. That's the biggest bubble game of the day. I'm not a bracketologist, but in my opinion, that's the best game of the day. And then I saved the obvious one for last, and I'll let you two run after it.
DeRosa, I'll let you get to that. One other one I want to point out just real quick. Back in the SEC, South Carolina on the road at Georgia. A couple weeks ago, Georgia went into South Carolina and beat them. The last team to beat South Carolina since they've all of a sudden became a top 25 team. South Carolina wins this game. They stay stride for stride with Alabama in the race for the SEC, and they will 100% be a top 25 in the ECB poll next week, even if I have to cheat and write down the answer for somebody because they deserve it. But you know how I feel about Georgia. They need a win. This would be a big-time win if they could sweep South Carolina the way Carolina's playing. That's a underrated good game to keep an eye on Saturday.
I have a bone to pick with a South Carolina fan very quickly who came in my mentions when I posted my top 25. I don't have the name in front of you, but if you're listening, you know who you are. Talking about like if this was North Carolina beating whoever,
that, yeah.
and I'll pull it up before the end of it for the shout outs. I'll give him a shout out at the end.
Yeah.
But basically he was like, if this was North Carolina, if they beat like Georgia Tech and whatever. I mean, it was like if the roles were flipped, and I was like, no, I basically just told him that was ridiculous, and the Brave Power isn't that important for this sport of the season. And obviously, I probably will still rank them, but a lot has to happen on Saturday for things to start to fall into place. My head's going to be spinning writing my top 25 on Sunday morning when I normally do it. But this, I even told him, I'm like, if they can play Georgia close, I probably still vote them. So just keeping that in mind, that they don't have to beat Georgia to be top 25 worthy. I think those 2 wins alone, I think, are probably worth it. And then from there, it just is ridiculous. So
we got balloons behind.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Shout out to Steve Jobs for all the cool like stuff on the on the MacBook. I don't know what's going on. Shout out to Steve Jobs. That's my shout out. Shout out to Steve Jobs. So if you're watching live, enjoy that. That was
Go
it.
ahead,
Michael, please tell us the game of the day in the Big East on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm glad you left this one for me because this was the only other one I had. I actually got another one that I found just in case you also stole it. UConn at St. John's. It's in MSG. It's Rick Pitino. They actually played UConn really tough the first time. I thought they had a good game plan. Their 1-3-1 little pressure actually gave UConn some problems. So that was actually really fun. Now it's in MSG. UConn has dominated MSG recently in terms of fans. They just get down there. They show out that place. That game's going to be fun. You have Klingon versus Soriano. That's a fun matchup. Dennis Jenkins has really turned it up lately. Him versus Tristan Newton could be fun. I think St. John's is probably the toughest matchup for UConn in the Big East, honestly. So I think that game could be really fun. I think that one will be really close late. And then we go down there. Also, yeah, you mentioned the Syracuse team. I feel like I have to say this because I hate them with a burning passion. I hate how I kind of like all the players on this team. Like Judah Mintz is so much fun to watch. So is JJ Starling. I hate this team. I hate Syracuse. I don't want to see them in the tournament. But Judah Mintz is so much fun to watch, and I can't even deny it. He's just fun. He's good. Like, yeah. But also, let's give some A10 love. Same, also noon. My guy's at George Mason. Still,
I had that one.
Still like my guy Tony Skinn, still Keyshawn Hall. They going at UMass. UMass has proven something. Josh Cohen's been a really good transfer. Yeah, that's another game I'm gonna have my eye on at least a little bit. We talked about mainly all the other good games, but yeah, those are the few I'm gonna have a keen eye on. And obviously something this close late. Oh, you know what? Another one. Mountain trip. Colorado at Utah.
I missed that. I didn't see that one. That's good.
Yep.
I literally just saw it going down.
It's on the weekly pick'ems this week, yeah.
Do you believe the 50-50 crowd on the rumor is on Saturday, the MSG, it's going to be 50-50 because of tickets in the way. Really? You think so? Okay. I think that's going to be really important. I really do.
Yeah, UConn really takes over, especially here lately. They kind of always have, but I think the only other comparable fan base I've ever seen in my years of watching, especially during the Big East tournament days, would be Syracuse. Syracuse fills the Garden up tremendously. But UConn probably is the most dominant fan base in that. I've got UConn on upset alert. I'm with you. I think St. John's playing behind a home crowd for the most part. I think St. John's matches up really well, and Pitino's out to prove something. They get this. I think they kind of write their way into the NCAA tournament for sure with this marquee win. I think UConn is on upset alert and need to be ready to play. That's all I'll say about that. Let's round this show out. Go ahead.
They only go as far as Jenkins will take them, and I need Jenkins to have like 100 fantasy points because I'm playing you this week, and I forgot to start 2 players on Tuesday. So I need a Jenkins career night. So.
Very interesting. It's been a fun show. Let's wrap this up with shout outs. I've got one that I can think of off the top of my head, and this is kind of a fun one. I sent him a congratulations last night. Coach Scott Para, and by the way, a couple weeks ago, I talked to him. He had just got his 300th win. Now he's tucked his Rice team into Memphis last night and tucked down a faltering, I guess is the word for it, Memphis Tigers team. But regardless, that's a talented Memphis team. It's a conference matchup on the road, which we know, again, how hard it is to win on the road. and he got his ball club ready, and they got a big-time win for that team. I'm happy for Coach Para. I'm happy for the Rice Owls. Big-time win. That's my shout-out for today.
Yeah, so I was going to point this game out as an anti-shout-out. A fallout is what I was going to call it. Did you see the starting lineup Memphis ran out? First of all, Coach Para, he's still the less talented team. He made work with that group. Those guys.
Max Fiedler's he's a dude, man. He's a baller.
But did you see the starting lineup Penny Hardaway ran out there?
I did not.
I did.
Jaquan Walton, David Jones, Jonathan Pierre, Naquan Tomlin, Malcolm Dandridge. They ran the 0 ball handler, 0 shooting lineup out there. What was that?
The all-athlete team. The all-athlete team is what that was.
I mean, he put 4 slashers around a below post big. Just catch and dunk big. What is that? That was,
Well, he read
Trev,
the
I don't want to do this to you. Your Memphis team sucks. They're not a tournament team.
Me? Why? I was okay. I completely fair. The irony of that lineup, by the way, coming from Penny Hardaway, who was literally like one of the best ball handlers in the last 30 years in the NBA.
Crazy.
It's just kind of funny that worked out the way it was. I have a shout out, Joshua. I think you were gonna say something.
No, I was just going to make a joke. Penny, I think, before the game read the Kenny Payne School of starting lineups. So that's probably, I think, what happened. Wasn't his fault.
I need, once I get my office set up, I need to start a ticker right here that says like how many, like on construction sites, how many days we've had since an accident, how many days since we couldn't go through a podcast without mentioning Kenny Payne. Just have like a ticker right here.
0 every time.
Real quick, if
you get to the end, though, just be like Kenny Payne.
In all seriousness, though, shout out Trey White. They lost the other night. He was tremendous at a career high. He did all he could do. Go ahead, though.
Shout out to Seth Davis for that incredible piece that he put out for Coach Forbes' wife, Johnetta. I knew about the stroke when I talked to Coach Forbes in November in Charleston, but just to for someone to articulate, and Seth, love him or hate him, he's been one of the best writers of our sport of my entire life. He's been doing it for a long time. And the way he articulated that story to tell you how good this team has been, to know what Coach Forbes has been through and what that family's been through with his wife's stroke, that was just an incredible piece. And then 24 hours later for the website to crumble, themessenger.com no longer exists, if those didn't know that. He tweeted themessenger.com.sharpie, which is like his coin term for when things get marked out or whatever. Love Seth Davis to death. Appreciate the retweet on that. And just an incredible piece, and I'll link it in the episode description, or I'll put it out whenever the episode goes out. And then the American Conference, South Florida and Charlotte are tied with Florida Atlantic for the top of the conference. So
crazy.
Just shout out to the American.
Remove the interim tag from the Charlotte coach. I looked him up the other day. He's 100%. They found him from the Australian league, and he was going to be on staff of the coach who ended up taking the job at UVA really late. Remove the interim tag. If that team's at the top of the East, you owe it to him. Yeah. Aaron Furnick was his name.
I agree. That's a good point. Yeah. What a fun show. It's a different show.
I want to get a shout out first. Sorry. I feel like I have to.
Not a fallout, right? Not another fallout situation.
Not a fallout. This is a straight shout out. Max Rice, 35 points in the pit. You know how hard it is to win in the pit? 35 points from the coach's son. This is a bad take I had this summer. So I gave Josh shit. I give Trev shit. It's time to give myself shit. I had Boise State as a top 20 team entering the season. I had them above Houston entering the season. I had Boise State 18, I think.
You like Degenhart that much, huh?
Yeah. I was really in on that team. I wasn't super high on any Big 12 team that wasn't Baylor.
He turned his camera off.
Yeah. I had to expose myself too. I had to.
I'm blocking your number. This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
What?
So the fact that my top 20 team is going to be a tournament team, that's not my worst preseason take too. I had Maryland in my top 25. So
I think a lot of
UCLA. I had Maryland and UCLA in there.
That's bad.
Boise State, that's a tournament. Look, that win in the pit, that's a tournament team right now. I think that might have just sealed their tournament. As long as they don't lose any dumb game, which is very possible. That's a tournament team. They're playing a lot better ball recently. Roddy Anderson looks like a legit point guard. And if you're getting good Max Rice, like they got good Max Rice last night, they might win a game in the tournament. I don't know. I'll pick them again and they'll lose. But yeah, I had Boise State above Houston.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it in hindsight, Boise State's only bad loss right now is UNLV. Mm-hmm. Their losses, on the road at Clemson, neutral to Virginia Tech. I mean, I guess how you look at Virginia Tech would tell you if that's bad or not. Butler on a neutral site, that's not necessarily a bad loss.
He was like, you were looking down. He was leaning forward every time you said a different team. Then as you got to Butler, he was like,
yeah. Washington State's been proven to be a pretty damn good team, so that's not a bad loss. The UNLV loss again, probably the worst loss, and then they lose the other night or last Saturday in overtime to Utah State. So yeah, I'm with you. Boise's playing a lot better. That's a great shout, especially the way New Mexico's been playing. Yeah. So great shout out. Shout out to the Mountain West for like the 8th podcast in a row. We appreciate the hell out of them. We appreciate the hell out of you guys who followed along, who's going to listen to this in traditional audio. It was a different show, but I really enjoyed it with the dichotomy of it, of having the Tennessee reporter, then followed up with the Kentucky guy. That was a lot of fun. If you guys enjoyed that, we may try to do that more often for big games if we can get the people aligned for it. But a lot of fun. We appreciate your guys' support, not having a show for the last 2 weeks, basically. Again, dealing with some personal stuff. Everything's good now. Appreciate the hell out of you. Trev's got, I don't know what he's got going on in the background, fireworks or something, but wrapping up for the Thursday edition of Everything College Basketball in episode 176. We appreciate our guest, Dallas Bowlin from the All Vol Call-In Show, and then Brandon Ramsey from Kentucky Sports Radio. For Trev, for Michael, and myself, we hope you guys enjoyed this, and we will catch you Sunday for episode 177. We'll review all the craziness that's about to happen on Saturday. Until then, stay safe. Enjoy time with your family, friends, pets, loved ones, and all that. They're not here forever, so enjoy the time with them and make sure you have well spent time with them. But see you guys on Sunday, and we will catch you down the road.
the Mountain West is a power conference.